The warehouse reeked of rust and fear. Jade's wrists burned against the rope as she watched Dominic Ferrara walk through the door, alone, hands raised, his usual army of bodyguards nowhere to be seen. His dark eyes found hers across the concrete floor, and something shattered in her chest. "Let her go, Popoff." His voice cut through the Chicago winter air like broken glass. "You want me? Here I am." Mikhail Popov laughed, the sound echoing off metal beams. The great Dominic Ferrara crawling on his belly for a little Chinese nurse, his gun pressed cold against Jade's temple. How touching. But Jade wasn't looking at the gun. She was staring at Dominic's face, at the man who'd spent weeks protecting her from the shadows, who'd quietly paid her medical bills, who'd made sure she got home safe every night after her shifts, the man whose 7-year-old daughter she'd sheltered during a storm, never knowing that one act of kindness would change everything. "You saved my daughter," Dominic had told her that first morning, standing in her tiny Chinatown apartment doorway. Now he was about to die for her. "Daddy." The small voice from behind the shipping containers made everyone freeze. Alessia stepped into the light, her dark hair tangled, her school uniform torn. She'd followed them here, and that's when Jade realized, some storms never really end. They just teach you who's worth weathering them with. Welcome to Passion and Power, where love conquers even the darkest empires. If this story already has your heart racing, drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button. We've got so many more breathtaking Mafia romances waiting for you. Your support means everything to our storytelling family. The emergency room at Chicago General buzzed with its usual chaos, but Jade Huang moved through it like a dancer who'd memorized every step. 28 years old, exhausted from a double shift, she still managed to smile at the elderly man she was wheeling to discharge. "You take care of that ankle, Mr. Peterson," she said, her voice gentle despite the fatigue weighing on her shoulders. "And no more climbing ladders to clean gutters." He patted her hand with weathered fingers. "You're an angel, sweetheart. Your parents raised you right." Jade's smile faltered slightly. Her parents, still living in the cramped apartment above their restaurant in Chinatown, still working 18-hour days, still sending every spare dollar back to relatives in China. She hadn't told them about the medical bills piling up on her kitchen table, the ones from her own emergency appendectomy 3 months ago. They had enough to worry about. "Jade!" Ashley's voice cut through her thoughts. Her fellow nurse appeared at her elbow, blonde hair escaping from her ponytail. "You heading out? This storm's getting nasty." Through the hospital windows, Jade could see the wind whipping snow into violent spirals. The weather service had been warning about this blizzard for days, the kind of storm that shut down Chicago completely. "Yeah, I need to get home before the trains stop running." Jade grabbed her worn winter coat from the staff room, checking her phone. 3 missed calls from her mother, probably worried about the weather. She'd call back once she was safely in her apartment. The cold hit her like a physical blow the moment she stepped outside. Snow stung her cheeks as she hurried toward the L station, her breath forming white clouds in the frigid air. The streets were already nearly empty, most people smart enough to be inside. She was halfway to Chinatown when she heard it, a sound that made her stop dead in her tracks despite the howling wind. Crying. A child. Crying. Jade turned, squinting through the snow, and saw her, a little girl maybe 7 years old, huddled against the brick wall of a closed restaurant. Her dark hair was soaked, her pink coat inadequate against the storm. She was alone. "Hey, sweetheart," Jade called out, approaching slowly. The child looked up with enormous brown eyes, tears frozen on her cheeks. "Are you okay? Where are your parents?" I don't know," the girl sobbed. "I got lost. The bad men were chasing us and Anna told me to run, but then I couldn't find her and I don't know where Daddy is." Jade's nurse instincts kicked in immediately. The child was showing early signs of hypothermia, shivering, pale skin, confusion. Whatever had happened, whoever this Anna was, the immediate priority was getting this little girl warm and safe. "What's your name, honey?" "Alessia," she whispered. "Okay, Alessia. I'm Jade, and I'm a nurse. I'm going to take you somewhere warm, and we'll figure out how to find your daddy, okay?" Alessia nodded, allowing Jade to scoop her up. The child was lighter than she should be, and her lips had a blue tinge that made Jade's heart race with professional concern. Jade's apartment was only 3 blocks away, but it felt like miles as she carried Alessia through the storm. By the time she got her key in the lock, both of them were shaking violently. "Let's get you out of these wet clothes," Jade murmured, setting Alessia down in her small living room. The apartment wasn't much. A studio with a Murphy bed, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom that barely qualified as a closet, but it was warm and safe. She ran a bath, testing the water temperature carefully. Not too hot, just warm enough to get your body temperature back up. As a pediatric nurse, she'd treated hypothermia before. "Can you tell me your last name, sweetheart? Or your daddy's phone number?" Alessia shook her head, her teeth still chattering. "I'm not supposed to tell strangers our real names. Daddy says it's not safe." A chill ran down Jade's spine that had nothing to do with the cold. What kind of 7-year-old was taught not to give their real name? But she pushed the questions aside. Right now, this child needed care, not an interrogation. After the bath, Jade wrapped Alessia in her warmest pajamas and every blanket she owned. She heated up a can of chicken soup, the only food she had that seemed appropriate for a child, and watched as Alessia ate with the desperate hunger of someone who hadn't had a proper meal in hours. "Better?" Jade asked, sitting beside her on the small couch. Alessia nodded, some color finally returning to her cheeks. "You're really nice. Anna always said there were good people in the world, but Daddy says most people are dangerous." "Anna is the person who was with you?" "She takes care of me when Daddy's working. But the bad men came to the mall and she grabbed me and we ran, but then we got separated in all the people in the storm." Alessia's eyes filled with tears again. Jade pulled her close, her heart aching for this frightened child. "We'll find your daddy, I promise. But right now, you need to sleep. You can take my bed and I'll sleep right here on the couch." "You won't leave?" "I won't leave." As Alessia finally drifted off to sleep, Jade sat in her tiny kitchen, staring at her phone. She should call the police, report a found child. But something about Alessia's words, the fear in her voice when she talked about bad men, the way she'd been taught not to give her real name, made Jade hesitate. Outside, the storm raged on, and somewhere in Chicago, a father was looking for his daughter. Jade just hoped that when he found them, she hadn't made the biggest mistake of her life. The knock on her door came at exactly 7:23 a.m. Jade had barely slept, checking on Alessia every hour, listening to the storm finally die down around dawn. She was making coffee when the knock came, 3 sharp raps that somehow managed to sound both polite and absolutely authoritative. Through the peephole, she saw him, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black wool coat that probably cost more than her monthly rent, dark hair, sharp jawline, and eyes that seemed to see everything. Behind him stood another man, shorter, stockier, with the kind of alertness that screamed security. But it was the first man who made her breath catch. There was something about the way he carried himself, the careful control in his posture, that spoke of power, real power. "Jade Huang?" His voice was deep, cultured, with just a trace of an accent that suggested Italian heritage. "Yes? My name is Dominic Ferrara. I believe you have my daughter." The world tilted. Jade's hand tightened on the door handle as pieces clicked into place. Alessia's fear of giving her real name, her talk of bad men, the expensive clothes she'd been wearing under that inadequate coat. Ferrara. She knew that name. Everyone in Chicago knew that name, even if they pretended not to. Jade started, then stopped. Behind her, she heard the soft padding of bare feet. "Daddy!" Alessia appeared at Jade's side, and the transformation in Dominic Ferrara's face was instantaneous. The controlled mask cracked, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. He dropped to one knee as Alessia launched herself into his arms. "Principessa," he whispered, holding her so tightly Jade thought he might never let go. God, I thought I'd lost you." "Jade saved me," Alessia said, pulling back to look at her father. "She gave me soup and warm clothes and let me sleep in her bed. She's really nice, Daddy." Dominic's eyes met Jade's over his daughter's head, and she saw something there that made her chest tight, gratitude so profound it was almost painful to witness. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. Jade stepped aside, acutely aware of her tiny apartment, as Dominic and his companion, bodyguard she realized, entered. The space seemed to shrink around Dominic's presence. He was wearing a crisp white dress shirt under his coat, the top 4 buttons undone, revealing a glimpse of muscled chest and what looked like the edge of a tattoo on his neck. A platinum Rolex caught the morning light on his wrist. "This is Frank," Dominic said, nodding to the other man. "My head of security." Frank's eyes were already cataloguing every exit, every potential threat. Jade wondered what he saw when he looked at her. A 28-year-old nurse in scrubs and a cardigan, living in a studio apartment that could fit inside most people's closets. "Alessia told me what happened," Dominic continued, his attention focused entirely on Jade. "You found her in the storm." "She was hypothermic," Jade said, her professional instincts overriding her nervousness. "Another hour in that cold and—" She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. "And you brought her here, fed her, cared for her." Dominic's voice was carefully neutral, but there was something underneath it. Surprise, maybe. As if kindness was a foreign concept in his world. Anyone would have done the same thing. "No," Dominic said quietly. "They wouldn't have." The weight of his gaze made Jade's skin warm. She found herself noticing details. The way his dark hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it all night. The faint lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless hours. The careful way he moved, as if violence was always a possibility he had to be ready for. "I need to ask you something," he said. "Did Alessia tell you anything about what happened? About the men who were chasing her?" Jade glanced at Alessia, who was now curled up on the couch, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "She mentioned someone named Anna, and that there were bad men at a mall. She and Anna got separated in the crowd." Dominic's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Anna Delgado, her nanny. We found her body this morning." The words hit Jade like a physical blow. "Oh God, Alessia doesn't know." "Not yet." Dominic's voice was rough. "Anna died protecting her, the men who took her. They won't be a problem anymore." There was something in the way he said it that made Jade's blood run cold. She didn't want to think about what "won't be a problem anymore" meant in Dominic Ferrara's world. "I want to compensate you," Dominic said, reaching into his coat. "For what you did. For the risk you took." "No." The word came out sharper than Jade intended. "I don't want your money." Dominic's hand stilled. "Excuse me?" "I said I don't want your money. I helped a child who needed help. That's what decent people do." For a moment, the room was completely silent. Frank's eyebrows had risen slightly, as if he'd never heard anyone refuse Dominic Ferrara anything. Dominic himself was staring at Jade with an expression she couldn't read. "Decent people," he repeated slowly. "Yes." "And you think I'm not a decent person?" It wasn't a question, but Jade answered anyway. "I think you're a man who's used to buying solutions to problems, but some things can't be bought." The silence stretched longer this time. Then, unexpectedly, Dominic smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face and made Jade's heart do something dangerous in her chest. "You're right," he said. "I am used to buying solutions. And you're also right that some things can't be bought." His eyes never left hers. "But that doesn't mean I won't try to protect what matters." Before Jade could ask what he meant by that, Alessia stirred on the couch. "Daddy, can we visit Jade again? I like her." Dominic's expression softened as he looked at his daughter. "We'll see, Principessa. Right now we need to get you home." He stood, lifting Alessia easily. At the door, he turned back to Jade one more time. "Thank you," he said simply, "for giving me back the most important thing in my world." And then they were gone, leaving Jade standing in her suddenly too quiet apartment, wondering why the absence of a man she'd known for less than an hour felt like losing something she hadn't known she needed. Outside her window, Chicago was waking up after the storm, but Jade had the strangest feeling that her own storm was just beginning. 3 days later, Jade's medical bills disappeared. She stared at the computer screen in the hospital's billing office, reading the same words over and over. Account paid in full. Outstanding balance, 0, zeros. There must be some mistake, she told the clerk. A middle-aged woman named Betty, who'd been processing medical bills since before Jade was born. No mistake, honey. Anonymous benefactor paid the whole thing. Happens sometimes with the really big bills. Some rich folks like to play guardian angel. Jade's hands trembled as she walked back to the emergency department. $18,000. Gone. Just like that. She knew exactly who had done it. You look like you've seen a ghost, Ashley commented, appearing at her elbow with a cup of coffee. Everything okay? Someone paid my medical bills, Jade said numbly. What? All of them? Who? Jade couldn't answer that question. Not without explaining about the storm, about Alessia, about the man with dangerous eyes who'd stood in her living room and looked at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. The next morning she found the envelope slipped under her apartment door. Thick, cream-colored paper with her name written in elegant script. Inside was a single card. Jade. Thank you again for protecting what matters most. If you ever need anything, call this number. D.F. Below it was a phone number and an address she recognized, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Chicago. Jade crumpled the card, then smoothed it out again. She told herself she was angry about the presumption, about the way he'd just decided to insert himself into her life. But the truth was more complicated than anger. The truth was that she couldn't stop thinking about him. Over the next week, strange things started happening. Small things that might have been coincidences if Jade believed in coincidences. Her usual train home was delayed, so she took a later one, and later learned there had been an attempted mugging at her usual time. A man matching Frank's description was seen discouraging the would-be mugger. Her landlord suddenly decided to fix the broken heating in her building, something he'd been ignoring for months. The Chinese restaurant where she grabbed dinner most nights started refusing her money, claiming she'd won some contest she'd never entered. You have a guardian angel, Ashley teased when Jade mentioned the strange run of good luck. Or a very generous stalker. Jade didn't find it amusing. She found it terrifying because every small kindness made her think of Dominic Ferrara, and thinking of Dominic Ferrara made her feel things she had no business feeling about a man whose world was built on violence. The breaking point came on a Thursday night. Jade was walking home from her late shift, taking her usual route through Chinatown, when she noticed the black sedan following her. It stayed exactly 3 car lengths behind, matching her pace perfectly. Fear spiked through her chest. She turned down a side street, and the car turned too. She ducked into an all-night convenience store, and through the window she watched the sedan pull over and wait. With shaking hands, she pulled out the card she'd been carrying in her wallet for 2 weeks. He answered on the first ring. Jade. Just her name, but something in his voice made her knees weak. There's a car following me, she said without preamble. Black sedan, license plate. She squinted through the window. I can't see it clearly, but it's been tailing me for 6 blocks. Where are you? Ming's Market on Wentworth. Stay inside. Don't come out until I tell you to. The line went dead. Jade clutched her phone, watching the sedan through the window. The elderly store owner, Mr. Ming, looked at her with concern. You okay, Miss Jade? You look scared. I'm fine, Mr. Ming, just waiting for a friend. 7 minutes later, another black car pulled up behind the sedan. This one was larger, more expensive. Jade watched as 2 men got out. One of them was Frank, the other she didn't recognize. They approached the sedan with the casual confidence of predators. Whatever conversation they had with the occupants of the first car was brief. The sedan pulled away quickly, tires squealing slightly. Frank looked toward the store window, nodded once, and got back in his car. Jade's phone buzzed. It's safe now. Frank will drive you home. I don't need... Jade. The way he said her name stopped her protest cold. Please, let me do this one thing. Frank was waiting outside the store, holding the passenger door open. He was polite, professional, and completely silent during the 10-minute drive to her apartment. But as she got out of the car, he spoke for the first time. He's not what you think he is, Frank said quietly. The boss. People see the reputation, the family name, and they think they know. But they don't know what I know. And what's that? That he hasn't slept more than 2 hours at a time since the night you brought Alessia home. That he's had men watching every route you take to and from work, making sure you're safe. That he's never asked anyone to do that before, not for anyone who wasn't family. Frank's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. He's falling for you, Miss Huang. And in our world, that makes you the most dangerous woman in Chicago. Jade stood on the sidewalk, watching the car disappear into traffic. Frank's words echoing in her head. The most dangerous woman in Chicago. She was still thinking about it when she noticed the figure standing in the shadows across the street, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat. Even from a distance, she could feel the weight of his gaze. Dominic stepped into the light and Jade's breath caught. His white shirt was open at the collar, revealing that tantalizing glimpse of tattoo. His dark hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. The platinum Rolex on his wrist caught the streetlight as he raised his hand in a small wave. They stood there for a moment, separated by asphalt and a world of differences, just looking at each other. Then Dominic turned and walked away, melting back into the shadows like he'd never been there at all. But Jade knew he had been, just like she knew he'd been watching over her for weeks, protecting her from dangers she didn't even know existed. And God help her. Instead of being afraid, she was starting to feel something else entirely, something that felt dangerously like falling. The attack came on a Tuesday morning, swift and brutal as a Chicago winter. Jade was leaving the hospital after a night shift when the van pulled up. 3 men, moving with military precision. She had just enough time to scream before a cloth covered her mouth and nose, and the world went black. She woke up in what looked like an abandoned warehouse, her hands zip-tied behind her back, her head pounding from whatever they'd used to drug her. The space smelled of rust and motor oil, and somewhere in the distance she could hear the sound of traffic. Ah, the little nurse awakens. The voice was accented, Russian, she thought, and when she looked up she saw a man in an expensive suit sitting across from her. He was maybe 50, with silver hair and cold blue eyes that reminded her of winter ice. "My name is Mikhail Popov," he said conversationally. "You probably don't know who I am, but you've certainly caused me a great deal of trouble." "I don't know what you're talking about," Jade said, her voice hoarse. "No? You didn't shelter a certain little girl during a storm? You didn't interfere with my business." The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. "You're the one who tried to take Alessia." Mikhail smiled, and it was the coldest thing Jade had ever seen. Alessia Ferrara, Dominic's precious little princess. Do you know how long I've been planning to get my hands on that child? How much money and effort went into that operation? "She's 7 years old," Jade whispered, horror crawling up her throat. "She's leverage, or she was, until you decided to play hero." Mikhail stood, straightening his cufflinks. "But perhaps this will work out even better. You see, Miss Huang, Dominic Ferrara has been making my life very difficult lately. Moving in on my territory, disrupting my operations. I need him to understand that there are consequences for such actions. He'll never trade himself for me. I'm nobody to him." "Oh, but that's where you're wrong." Mikhail pulled out his phone, showing her a series of photographs. Jade's blood turned to ice as she recognized herself in each one, leaving the hospital, walking to the train, entering her apartment building. "My men have been watching you for weeks. Do you know how many resources Dominic has devoted to keeping you safe? How many of his own men he's assigned to shadow your every move?" The photos kept coming. Dominic himself, standing across from her apartment building. Frank, following her train. Other men she didn't recognize, always somewhere in the background of her daily life. "Her man doesn't protect someone that thoroughly unless they matter to him," Mikhail continued. "And if you matter to Dominic Ferrara, then you're exactly the leverage I need." Jade's phone, which they'd left in her pocket, started ringing. Mikhail smiled and answered it himself. "Ferrara, I was wondering when you'd call." Even from across the room, Jade could hear the deadly calm in Dominic's voice. "If you hurt her, Popov, I will burn your entire organization to the ground." Such passion for a woman you barely know. How refreshing. Mikhail's eyes never left Jade's face. "I have a proposition for you. Come to the warehouse on Pier 19, come alone, come unarmed, and I might let your little nurse live. And if I don't, then you'll receive her body in pieces." The line went dead. Mikhail pocketed the phone and turned back to Jade. "Now we wait," he said, "and hope that Dominic Ferrara cares about you as much as I think he does." 2 hours later, Jade heard the sound of a car engine outside. Her heart hammered against her ribs as footsteps approached the warehouse entrance. The door opened, and Dominic walked in. He was alone, just as Mikhail had demanded. His hands were raised, showing he was unarmed. But even without weapons, even outnumbered 5-1, he radiated a dangerous energy that made Jade's captors shift nervously. "Let her go," Dominic said, his voice cutting through the warehouse like a blade. "Your fight is with me." "How noble," Mikhail drawled. "The great Dominic Ferrara, brought low by a woman. Your grandfather would be ashamed. My grandfather would understand that some things are worth dying for." Dominic's eyes found Jade's across the warehouse floor, and the intensity in his gaze made her chest tight. There was something there, something raw and desperate and absolutely certain. "You saved my daughter," he said, speaking directly to her now, ignoring the guns pointed at his head. "And somewhere along the way you saved me too." "How touching," Mikhail interrupted. "But I'm afraid this reunion will be brief. You see, Dominic, I don't just want you dead. I want you to suffer first. I want you to watch as I—" The sound of shattering glass cut him off. The warehouse's skylights exploded inward as black-clad figures rappelled down ropes moving with lethal precision. Frank's voice boomed through a megaphone. "Chicago PD! Everyone on the ground!" But they weren't Chicago PD. Jade could see that immediately. These were Dominic's men, and they moved like a military unit that had trained together for years. The firefight was brief and brutal. Mikhail's men were outgunned and outmaneuvered from the start. Within minutes it was over. Dominic was cutting through Jade's restraints before the gun smoke had even cleared, his hands gentle despite the violence that had just erupted around them. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Jade shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. Now that the adrenaline was fading, the reality of what had just happened was hitting her. Men had died because of her, because she'd gotten involved in a world she didn't understand. "This is my fault," she whispered. "If I hadn't—" "No." Dominic's hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "This is not your fault. This is the world I live in, the choices I've made. You did nothing wrong. But Anna is dead. And those men, they're dead because they threatened something precious to me," Dominic said fiercely. "Because they thought they could use you to hurt me, and I will never, ever let that happen again." The way he was looking at her made Jade's heart race for entirely different reasons. There was something in his eyes she'd never seen before, something vulnerable and desperate and completely honest. "Dominic," she started, but he was already pulling away, his walls slamming back into place. "Frank will take you home," he said, his voice carefully neutral again. "You'll have protection round the clock. This won't happen again. What about you? I have business to finish." Jade looked around the warehouse at the bodies on the floor, at the blood splattered across concrete. "What kind of business?" Dominic's smile was sharp as a knife. "The kind that ensures Mikhail Popov never threatens anyone I care about again." He was already walking away, and Jade realized with crystal clarity that if she let him leave now, say if she let him disappear back into his world of violence and shadows, she might never see him again. "Dominic, wait!" He stopped, but didn't turn around. "I need to know," she called out, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "What am I to you, really?" For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, without turning around, he said quietly, "You're the first good thing that's happened to me in 20 years, and that's exactly why you need to stay away from me." And then he was gone, leaving Jade standing in a warehouse full of bodies, wondering how saving one little girl had led to this moment, and why losing Dominic Ferrara felt like losing a piece of her soul. Jade didn't see Dominic for 3 weeks. Frank's men were everywhere, shadows that followed her to work, invisible guardians who ensured her safety while maintaining their distance. She knew they were there, could feel their presence like a weight on her shoulders, but Dominic himself had vanished from her life as completely as if he'd never existed. The only evidence that any of it had been real was Alessia. The little girl appeared at the hospital on a Thursday afternoon, holding the hand of a woman Jade didn't recognize, another nanny, she assumed, to replace poor Anna. Alessia's face lit up when she saw Jade coming out of the elevator. "Jade!" She broke free from her caretaker and ran across the lobby, throwing her arms around Jade's waist. "I missed you so much." "Hey, sweetheart," Jade said, kneeling down to Alessia's level. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see where you work, and I wanted to give you this." Alessia pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket, a drawing in crayon of 3 stick figures holding hands. "That's you, and me and Daddy. We're a family." Jade's throat tightened. "Alessia?" "Daddy's been really sad since you stopped coming around," Alessia continued with the brutal honesty of childhood. "He thinks I don't notice, but I do. He stares out the window a lot, and he doesn't smile anymore." "I'm sure your daddy is fine," Jade said gently, though her heart was breaking. "He's a very strong man." "Strong people can be sad too," Alessia said matter-of-factly. "That's what Anna used to tell me. She said Daddy was sad because he lost his family when he was little, like I lost my mommy. But then you came and he wasn't sad anymore. Why did you stop coming?" Before Jade could answer, the new nanny approached. "Alessia, we need to go. Your father will be worried." As they walked away, Alessia turned back one more time. "I'm going to ask Daddy to invite you for dinner," she called out. "He listens to me sometimes." That night Jade couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Alessia's words, about Dominic staring out windows, about the look in his eyes in that warehouse when he'd said she was the first good thing to happen to him in 20 years. She was still awake when her phone rang at 2 a.m. "Jade," Dominic's voice was rough, exhausted. "I need you to come with Frank, now." "What's wrong? Is Alessia—" "Alessia's fine, it's not about her." 20 minutes later, Frank was at her door, his usual stoic expression replaced by something that might have been worry. The drive through Chicago's empty streets was silent, but Jade could feel the tension radiating from him. They pulled up to a mansion in Lincoln Park that took Jade's breath away. Even in the darkness, she could see the elegant lines of the architecture, the perfectly manicured grounds, the kind of wealth that most people only saw in movies. Frank led her through a side entrance, past rooms filled with priceless art and furniture that belonged in museums. They climbed a sweeping staircase to the second floor, where Frank stopped outside a set of double doors. "He's in there," Frank said quietly. "And Miss Huang, whatever happened between you two, whatever he said to push you away, he didn't mean it, not the way you think." Jade pushed open the doors and stepped into what was clearly Dominic's study. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk, windows that overlooked the lake. And there, silhouetted against the night sky, was Dominic. He was still wearing his white dress shirt, but it was wrinkled now, the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. His dark hair was disheveled, and when he turned to face her, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "You said it was an emergency. It is." He moved closer, and Jade caught the scent of his cologne mixed with something else. Whiskey, maybe. "I can't sleep, I can't work. I can't think about anything except you." Jade's heart hammered against her ribs. "Dominic, do you know what I've done in the past 3 weeks?" he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "I've dismantled Mikhail Popov's entire operation, piece by piece, methodically, until there was nothing left. I told myself it was about justice, about protecting my family. But that wasn't why I did it. Then why? Because he put his hands on you." Dominic's voice was raw, dangerous. "Because he threatened you, and the thought of anyone hurting you makes me want to burn the world down." He was close enough now that Jade could see the faint scar along his jawline, could count the dark lashes that framed his intense eyes. Close enough that she could see the tattoo on his neck more clearly, elegant script in what looked like Italian. "You told me to stay away from you," she whispered. "I lied." His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing across her skin with devastating gentleness. "I've been lying to myself for weeks, telling myself that you're better off without me, that you deserve someone clean, someone good, someone who doesn't have blood on his hands. And now, Now I'm selfish enough to admit that I don't care what you deserve. I only care what I need." His forehead touched hers, and Jade felt herself drowning in the intensity of his gaze. "I need you, Jade. I need you like I need air." "This is crazy," she breathed. "Your world, my world. They don't fit together. Then we'll make them fit." His other hand tangled in her hair, and Jade felt her resolve crumbling. "I know I'm asking you to take a leap of faith. I know I'm asking you to trust a man who's done terrible things. But I swear to you, on Alessia's life, that I will spend every day proving that you made the right choice." "What choice?" "The choice to love me back." The words hung in the air between them, a confession and a question all at once. Jade stared into his eyes and saw everything he was offering, the danger, the passion, the fierce protectiveness that would shield her from the world. She saw the man who would kill for her, die for her, remake himself entirely if that's what it took to keep her. "I do," she whispered. "Love you back. God help me, I do." The kiss was inevitable, desperate, full of 3 weeks of separation and longing. Dominic's lips claimed hers with a hunger that made her knees weak, and Jade melted against him, finally admitting to herself what she'd known since that first morning in her apartment. She belonged to him, had belonged to him from the moment he'd walked through her door, looking for his daughter. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said simply. Jade's eyes widened. "What?" "Marry me. Not because you have to, not because of some arrangement or contract. Marry me because I love you, and because I want to spend the rest of my life proving that love to you every single day. Dominic, we barely know each other. I know that you risked everything to save a child you'd never met. I know that you refused my money because your kindness can't be bought. I know that you're brave enough to stand up to me, gentle enough to heal people, and strong enough to survive in my world." His hands framed her face again. "I know that you're the missing piece I didn't even realize I was looking for." Jade stared at him, this dangerous, powerful man who was looking at her like she held his entire world in her hands. And maybe she did. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll take that leap of faith. Yes, I'll trust you with my heart." She smiled through the tears she didn't realize were falling. "But I have one condition. Anything. Alessia gets to be our flower girl." Dominic's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "Deal." And as he kissed her again, Jade thought about storms, how they could destroy everything in their path, or how they could wash away the old to make room for something beautiful and new. She'd sheltered a lost girl during a storm, and somehow in the process she'd found her way home. Years later, Jade would look back on that snowy night in Chicago and marvel at how one act of kindness could change everything. The wedding had been small, intimate, just family and a few close friends in the garden of Dominic's mansion. Alessia had indeed been their flower girl, beaming as she scattered rose petals down the aisle. Jade's parents had been shocked at first, then charmed by Dominic's old-world courtesy and obvious devotion to their daughter. Now, as Jade watched her husband push their 2-year-old son on the swing set he'd had installed in their backyard, she felt that familiar flutter of amazement at the life they'd built together. Dominic had kept his promise. He'd stepped back from the more violent aspects of his business, focusing instead on the legitimate enterprises that had always been part of the Ferrara empire. He was still powerful, still dangerous when he needed to be, but he was also a devoted father and husband who read bedtime stories and coached Little League. "Higher, Daddy!" little Marco squealed, his dark hair so like his father's flying in the breeze. "Any higher and your mama will have my head," Dominic laughed, but he pushed the swing a little higher anyway. Alessia, now 12 and already showing signs of the beauty she'd inherit from her Italian heritage, looked up from her homework. "Mom, can you help me with this math problem?" "Of course, sweetheart." Jade settled beside her stepdaughter, though they'd long since dropped the step part, and looked at the equation. "What are you having trouble with?" As they worked through the problem together, Jade felt Dominic's eyes on her. She looked up to find him watching them with that expression she'd come to know so well, the one that said he still couldn't quite believe this was his life. "What?" she asked, smiling. Just thinking about storms, he said, lifting Marco from the swing and settling him on his hip. How they can bring the most unexpected gifts. Jade's heart swelled as she looked at her family, this beautiful, complicated, perfect family that had started with a frightened little girl and a woman who couldn't walk past someone in need. The best gifts, she agreed, reaching for his free hand, always come from the storm. And as the Chicago sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Jade Ferrara knew that some stories don't end. They just keep getting better, one day at a time. And that's how one nurse's kindness during a storm changed 2 lives forever here at Passion and Power. If this story made your heart race and left you believing in the power of unexpected love, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible Mafia romances that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Your support means everything to our storytelling family, and we can't wait to bring you more passionate tales of love conquering all. Until next time, keep believing in the magic of love.